Hello, and welcome to the first episode of the V8 Supercars Fancast. This is the show where I like to talk about what happened in the last race, some notable events, any news that might have come up since my last episode. As this is the first episode, there won't be any news to go over because it's the first one since the last episode. So, we're just going to dive straight into the race results for the last race, which was the Perth Super Sprint at Barbagello. So, we had a very interesting weekend. Since last year, the rules for qualifying have changed significantly in V8 Supercars, but only for short tracks. So, Barbagello was a track that can be completed in less than a minute, so it makes it definitely a short track. The thing is here that last year there was quite a few dangerous incidents where slow cars going on their out lap, slow cars going on their in lap, or cars that just were slow in general going around the circuit were interfering with cars that were trying to put on a flying lap. Because the circuit is so short, there's not a lot of space to avoid accidents and things like that. So it ended up becoming quite dangerous last year. And the problem with that is that, you have accidents, it's unsafe, drivers can get hurt, so they changed it. So now we've got a three-phase qualifying format, not too dissimilar to how it works in Formula 1. So if you're used to Formula 1, or if you don't know how this qualifying works, the new qualifying rules work, basically how it works is that it's a bit of a weird mishmash. So the last practice session of the day, the 10 fastest drivers get to skip qualifying Q1, altogether and go to Q2. It kind of makes practice 4, not practice 4, but the last practice session before qualifying kind of turns it into qualifying, which I think is a bit of a strange rule. But regardless, the top 10 drivers move into Q2 straight away, automatically. So the cars that are left, which is 16, they participate in Q1. From Q1, the top 6 drivers move into Q2, which means the total amount of drivers in Q2 becomes 16. Then the top 10 drivers from Q2 move into Q3, and Q3 determines the final order for the top 10. So if you qualified in 7th in Q1, you will start on the grid in 17th at the race, because you don't get to participate in any of the other qualifying sessions. If you finish 11th in Q2, you will start in 11th in the race, and so on and so forth. Okay, so now that we've worked that out, this is a new rule. So it was pretty clear that some of the drivers were still coming to grips of how this rule works. They did use it at Simmons Plains, the round before this one. And we didn't really see much. We didn't see very many unusual qualifying positions there. But this one, we saw some very unusual results. So we'll go through it in order. But basically what happened was that in qualifying for race 11, so that was the Saturday race, the top 10 was Scott McLaughlin, Cameron Waters, Fabian Coulthard, Mark Winterbottom, Tim Slade, Chaz Mostert, David Reynolds, Craig Lowndes, and Anton De Pasquale, and Will Davison. So there's nothing too unusual about this, except that none of the Red Bull cars are in there at all, and neither are the Mobile One Boost mobile racing cars. So that was kind of interesting. A lot of people were wondering what happened to the Red Bull cars. Shane Van Gisbergen qualified in 12th and Jamie Whincup qualified in 14th. So as you can see, that means that they didn't make the cut into Q2, which is unusual for them, very unusual for them. When I saw this result, I thought maybe there might have been some issues with their car, like there was at Phillip Island. This wasn't the case. I think it's just simply the new rules have caught some people out as well this year. So I think some people were just called out. Nick Percat qualified in 18th, he's quite fast. So James Courtney qualified in 21st. So as you can see, he missed out on the he missed out on Q1 entirely, which is, again, it's unusual. It's very unusual for some of these people to be as far in as they are. And Rick Kelly qualified last, which isn't. He had issues with his car, so that isn't too unexpected. But even so, the gap from the number one qualified driver to Rick Kelly, even though he had his issues, was only a second. So that's a pretty tight field. That's a very tight field. Between first and fourth even was 0.09 seconds between them, which is incredibly tight. That's incredibly close. So some very exciting qualifying sessions. And when you look at it this way, clearly, it's a very hard track to get significantly faster times on than anyone else when they're qualifying so close together. So it's interesting to see. Obviously, some of the cars, like the Red Bull cars, for instance, just didn't put in quite a good enough lap before traffic happened or before they had to go in, and that was it. It was over for them. So, while I do appreciate the fact that there's less cars on the field now for each qualifying session, it clearly didn't work out for some people. For some people, I think they were taken unawares by maybe the length of the qualifying sessions. Remember, they're only 10 minutes each now, so it's very interesting to see these results. Very interesting. The race, though, race 11, so Scotty McLaughlin, he started in first. He finished in first. Not really a surprise. The guy's been on fire lately. Very much so. So the next two drivers are the ones, they were big winners. So I think everyone else underestimated, especially in the first race, how much tyre wear was going to play a part in this race. It was very clear that once the car started pitting early, that there were going to be some issues with the early pitted cars versus the late pitted cars. So in practice, we saw cars putting in about 20 laps on their tyres before they had to pit, before they started losing significant amount of speeds. And Mark Larkin even said during the race, I think race 2, he said that 10 laps equals about 1 second slower, so per lap on average. So if you do 10 laps around Barbagello, which remember is only a minute long, you'll be going on average about a second slower each lap, which is pretty incredible for tyre wear. It's a very short track. The reason why it's so heavy on tyre wear is because it's got all of its corners, pretty much every single one, bar I think the last turn, are long, slow corners, which are just awful for tyre wear. Absolutely awful for tyre wear. So it's not really a surprise that it's so damaging, but I think even the race crews were taken surprised by how damaging the tyre wear was. Scott McLaughlin, Tim Slade, Craig Lowndes, Cameron Waters. So I'll go over the top 10 first. So the top 10 for the race was Scott McLaughlin, Mark Winterbottom, Shane Van Gisbergen, Tim Slade, Craig Lowndes, Cameron Waters, Will Davison, Fabian Coulthard, Nick Percat, and Chaz Mostert. There are some notable names missing from there, such as Jamie Whincup. He finished in 11th due to a penalty. Scott Pye and James Courtney had no luck. Rick Kelly fought his way back up to 14th, so good on him. But as for the top 10, the reason why Mark Winterbottom and Mark Winterbottom was not too big of a surprise because he qualified in, I think, 4th. Yeah, he started in 4th on the grid, so not a huge surprise. Shane Van Gisbergen, though, made up 9 spots from his qualifying position, and so did Nick Percat, made up 9 spots. Rick Kelly made up 12. Now, a lot of these, like Nick Percat, James Courtney, Rick Kelly, they made up a lot of positions, and you can put this down to having a faster car and qualifying poorly, which is, in case of Rick Kelly and James Courtney, pretty much the case. They had good cars, but didn't qualify too well, so they fought their way through the field. The interesting thing here is what happened to Shane Van Gisbergen and Mark Winterbottom. So Scott McLaughlin, Tim Slade, Craig Lowndes, Cameron Waters, Will Davison, pretty much everybody on the field, they all pitted quite early. So I'm not sure who exactly pitted first, but someone went for the undercut. Pretty much everybody in the lead followed suit except for Mark Winterbottom and Shane Van Gisbergen. They chose to stay out approximately, I think most people went in on lap 20-ish, between laps 20 and 25. And Mark Winterbottom and Shane Van Gisbergen went in on between laps 30, around lap 30 or 35, between that window. Remember, this is a 50-lap race, so most of the field went in before halfway, and Winterbottom and Gisbergen went in after halfway. That's the important thing to note. Tyre wear makes such a huge difference in this track that even though when they pitted Mark Winterbottom and Gisbergen, they were only, I think, 1 or 2 seconds ahead of McLaughlin, who had already pitted. When they did pit, they each came out far back in the field, out of the top 10. And with about 15 laps to go, they each fought their way back into the top 3. Which is pretty amazing, to be honest. It was quite interesting to watch because they didn't even have to struggle. It's not like they had much faster cars than everybody else. They just had better tyres, and they simply just went around everybody. They couldn't even stop them. For instance, Gisbergen overtook Tim Slade on the last lap at the second last corner, and Slade couldn't do anything about it. He just had to let him go. He was looking at a top 3, Tim Slade, which would have been a good result for him this year. So it's very interesting to see how much of a factor tyre wear played into it. And good on Mark Winterbottom and Shane Van Gisbergen's race engineers for coming up with that plan, because their strategy was clearly the superior one. It didn't get around Scott McLaughlin, but Winterbottom was never in front of Scott McLaughlin, so you could consider him winning out in the end in that strategy, and especially Gisbergen, who started in 12th. You can definitely consider him a big winner in all of that. So race 1 was really about tyre wear. It was 50 laps long, so it was a bit of a shorter race than race 2. But qualifying for race 2 was also interesting. So Red Bull was at the top, 1 and 2. Shane Van Gisbergen and Jamie Whincup were at the top of the standings for this one. Then it was Chaz Mostert, Andrew Heimgartner, good on him, Rick Kelly in 5th, David Reynolds, Nick Percat, Michael Caruso, James Courtney, and Jack LeBrock were your top 10. So what you'll notice there is that there isn't a Scott McLaughlin, there isn't a Fabian Coulthard, there isn't a Cameron Waters, there isn't a Craig Lowndes, there isn't a Will Davison, there isn't a Scott Pye, there isn't lots of big names. Lots and lots of big names didn't make it. Mark Winterbottom didn't make it into the top 10. A lot of these people didn't even make it into the top 15 or the top 20. So this is what I mean by people being caught out by the new qualifying session rules. So the whole grid was Tim Blanchard in 11th, Tim Slade in 12th, Will Davison, Richie Stanaway, Scott Pye qualified in 15th, James Golding, Fabian Coulthard, the first of the Shell V-Power Racing team cars, was in 17th. Then Mark Winterbottom, Scott McLaughlin in 19th, Anton Di Pasquale, Simona Di Silvestro, Cameron Waters was 22nd, Holdsworth was 23rd, Hazelwood, Lowndes was 25th, and Tander was 26th. So Lowndes starting on the back of the grid. And Waters, the last of the Tickford cars, starting in 22nd. McLaughlin, the last of the Shell cars, starting in 19th, sorry. So this was incredible to watch, basically. Lots of big names right at the back of the field. And the race has even more interesting results. So I'll go through who was in the top 10 for the race, but Scott McLaughlin ended up winning race 12. He moved up 18 spots to do so. David Reynolds came second and Craig Lowndes came third, and he moved up 22 spots to come into third. James Courtney was in 4th, Gisbergen in 5th, Whincup in 6th, Percat in 7th, Heimgartner in 8th, and Jack LeBrock Jack LeBrock in 9th, and Rick Kelly in 10th. So this was a much longer race, 83 laps, and how exactly Scott McLaughlin and Craig Lowndes managed to make up so many spots is kind of a mystery to me. I watched the whole race, and because of how many pit stops and different tyre strategies were going on, along with different fuel loads, it was very hard to tell who was actually a big winner in pit stops. There were a lot of big losers. So in about lap 4 or so, the safety car came out, and pretty much everybody came into the pits. There was a lot of double stacking. For instance, Jamie Whincup had got ahead of Gisbergen by this point in the race, and they both came in, so Gizzy got double stacked on Jamie. Lowndes got double stacked on LeBrock. McLaughlin came in before Coulthard, and Coulthard finished in 16th overall, and a lot of that is due to the fact that he was double stacked behind McLaughlin. Things like that. Mark Winterbottom got double stacked on Mostert, so he finished in 21st. Not entirely a result of that, but he did finish that far down, and part of that is because he was double stacked right at the start of the race. And everyone who was double stacked lost a ton of positions, an absolute ton. Pit lane was very full at the time. So most of the people who were double stacked ended up losing out in the end. They just didn't recover from the amount of track position that was lost then, which is a shame. But these are the things that happen. Now, some people were wondering why, especially myself included, were wondering why certain people came into the pits when it would have made way more sense to stay out, including Gisbergen. Apparently in Gisbergen's case, there was a radio failure, and the team was surprised that he came in. He wasn't meant to. He was meant to stay out. Which makes perfect sense to me. I would have done the same for Coulthard. I would have left him out, but he ended up coming in, and apparently he was meant to. There was no failure there. The only person who stayed out was Will Davison. And I think rather than double stacking, it would have been much more safer to stay out, especially since it was only lap 4. Pretty much everybody got fuel and tyres. Yeah, it was very interesting. Not sure I would have made the same decisions as most of the teams then. But it really did set the tone for the rest of the race. McLaughlin came out, not in front, he came out in 7th after all the pit stops. So he entered the pits in, I think, 12th, 13th, 14th, something like that. And he came out of the pits in 7th. So that's how much double stacking was happening. He got out, he was the first one in his pit bay. He came out he skipped about half the positions he needed to skip to get to the front of the field. So he took about 7 spots when he was in 14th. Incredible effort. Incredible, very smart move by his team to bring him in when they did. But this was an example of the leading driver on the team having a distinct advantage, a very distinct advantage over their teammate who was in second behind them. So McLaughlin's a big winner out of that one. Lowndes, another big winner. And David Reynolds nearly drove off the track on the last corner, but he managed to scoop up second. So at the end of the race, tyre wear wasn't as much of a factor as the first race because people had seen what happened on Saturday and accounted for it accordingly. Gisbergen and Rick Kelly both came in very late, so they're on a 4-stop strategy instead of a 3-stop strategy to get new tyres with about 15 laps to go. This put them down into about, I think Gisbergen was in about 12th or 13th or 14th when he came out, and Rick Kelly was in about, he was all the way down to about 18th or 19th when he came out, and they both fought their way back up through the field. So Gisbergen finished in 5th, and Kelly finished in 10th, which is, again, good play by their race engineers. I think if Gisbergen hadn't been stacked, he would have had a much better chance at winning the race. He had a lot of speed in his car towards the end, so he did very well to get around the people he got around. He had a little bit of an incident with Heimgartner, I'm pretty sure, in the last lap, which was unfortunate. I would have liked to see some more clean racing. I don't think it was anyone's fault. Gisbergen just seemed to push him out to the... He just seemed to try and overtake him on some fast corners, and I think Heimgartner simply didn't have the experience to back off. But whether or not he should have been making the pass is debatable. Regardless, I think Gizzy would have gotten past him anyway if he had waited. I think he might have gotten a bit impatient because it was the last lap. But it's unfortunate to see Heimgartner lose all those positions because he did go off the road and Whincup and Percat got around him as a result. And he was having a very good race. He was in second for a lot of it. So it's unfortunate to see what happened to him. But it's good to see some of the younger drivers. Jack LeBlanc came 9th. It's good to see, and Simona came 12th. She moved up 9 spots. So it was good to see some of the younger drivers, some of the rookies, have a good crack at it today. Well, not today, but on Sunday and Saturday. And it's good to see the Nissans doing well too. I know 10th and 12th aren't that great, but it's much better than the start of the year. That's much better than a DNF, even though Michael Caruso had a bit of issues with almost DNFing, but he still made it in the end. And the Nissans ended up having a relatively good race. So if we move into the point standings after this race, in the Constructors' title, which I'll go through very quickly, Red Bull's still winning by 2,068 with 2,068 points. The Shell team, DJ Penske, is next with 2,056, so just 12 points separating them. And you can put down 90% of that to the fact that Fabian Coulthard has been severely underperforming compared to Scott McLaughlin. Scott winning the championship, Fabian's not even in the top 10, I don't think. So, yeah, that's they won't be happy with that one. We'll see how he finishes by the end of the season, but he's not doing too great at the moment. Next, in third by quite a margin, is the Mobile One Boost Mobile Racing, which I think used to be HRT, with 1,738 points. Then the two Tickford cards with Bottle Super Cheap, that's Mark Winterbottom and Chaz Mostert with 1,612. And then we've got the Blackwoods Freightliner Racing, which is BJR, Brad Jones Racing, basically. Nick Percat and Tim Slade with 1,578. So good on them. They're doing good. And as for the Drivers' Championship, which is the much more interesting one, Scott McLaughlin's pulled out his margin by almost 200 points now. He's got 1,247 back to Gisbergen, who's got 1,089. So he's sort of accelerating away. If anyone wants to catch him this season, which there are 3 drivers that are within striking distance of him right now, he'll basically need to have a bad round. He needs to have a bad race weekend and finish further down the table or DNF entirely for him to be caught by everybody else. Yep, as I said, Van Gisbergen's in second. Reynolds, he was in second. He had a bad race on Saturday. I think he finished in about 17th. So he moved down the ladder a little bit. Now he's got 1,079 points. So just 10 less than Gisbergen. So barely anything in it between those two. And Lowndes, surprisingly, is ahead of Whincup. Lowndes has 1,053 and Whincup has 979. So he's not even that close to McLaughlin. He's almost 300 points shy at the moment. It's very interesting to see how well Craig Rounds is doing, especially since he was sort of given the shaft by his team at Phillip Island. I don't think I need to repeat the controversy that happened there. But he was definitely given... It was definitely clear to us as viewers that Red Bull has been favouring very heavily Gisbergen and Whincup. If Lowndes finishes ahead of Whincup in the championship, it would be interesting to see what happens in the team structure. I don't think Lowndes or Whincup will be demoted or promoted based on whether or not they finish ahead or behind each other, unless it's a very significant margin. But it will be interesting to see if Whincup underperforms what Red Bull does, because at the moment Gisbergen's the top driver, and I don't know if they have an equal system or a number 2, number 1 driver system at Red Bull, but Lowndes is very clearly a distinct third in that team. So it'll be interesting to see how the structures change and how they treat each driver from here on out, especially if they keep this leaderboard going. It's unfortunate to see Gisbergen and Reynolds as far down as they are. They've had a few bad races, which basically has contributed to where they are. If they had finished, I know Gisbergen DNF'd, I think, on the Saturday race at Simmons Plains, or if he didn't DNF, he at least came very far back, and he had some major issues at Simmons Plains and Phillip Island that he had to wrestle with, and Reynolds has had some bad finishes as well, even though he's had some very good ones too. If they had had some more consistent finishes, I think they would be much closer to McLaughlin. So McLaughlin's gotten very lucky in that regard. But yeah, that's basically the championship results at the moment. McLaughlin in first, Gisbergen in second, Reynolds in third, Lowndes in fourth, all very close together for 2, 3, and 4. And McLaughlin won the round with 2 race wins on Saturday and Sunday. As for news this week or this fortnight, there isn't much news to go over. All of the big news happened last round with the announcement of the Mustang coming into it next year. The only thing to add is that Camaro or GM has announced that they were looking into putting the Camaro into the V8 Supercars, and Holden has said that they will not, they won't stop it. So basically we could have a Camaro, a Mustang, a Holden, and a Nissan in the field next year. So that's sort of what we're looking at the moment. At the moment we confirmed Mustang, Holden, Nissan, because the Mustang's replacing the Ford. So I don't think we'll see any Fords next year. We will see a Mustang, 100%. We will see Holdens, 100%. The Nissans are looking a little bit shaky, but some better results lately. Phillip Island, they did very well. Barbagello, they did better than expected. So hopefully Nissan doesn't pull their support. Heimgartner did very well as well. I forgot he's in a Nissan too. So it's good to see. It'll be good to see Nissan continue to put their support behind the Nissans. So the highest placed Nissan was 8th place for Heimgartner on Sunday. He also qualified very well. He qualified in 4th. So hopefully Nissan doesn't choose to repeal their support. Kelly's been driving well. Heimgartner's been driving well, especially this weekend. And Simona drove very well this weekend as well. So hopefully they don't rescind their support. That'd be nice. And hopefully next year we'll get to see some nice Chevrolet Camaros driving around the circuit. I'm not sure how many we'll get, but it might only be 1 or 2 teams that pick it up. If any, we might not get it at all. It's not confirmed or anything. I think it's just at a very preliminary stage at the moment. But it will be interesting to see more car brands running around the circuit. One of my favourite eras is when we had the multiple car brands, I think in 2014. We had the Volvo, the Mercedes, the Holden, the Fords, and the Nissans all flying around the track at once, and I thought that was more interesting, more manufacturers to go for, more to root for, and with more manufacturers comes more manufacturers' teams, which means that their teams supported by the brand, so a Mercedes team, a Volvo team, a Holden team, a Ford team, and a Nissan team. And the only one of those manufacturers' teams that are left is Nissan. We don't have a Holden team anymore. We don't have a Ford team anymore. So we don't really have any big manufacturers to throw money behind these teams, which is unfortunate because a lot of these teams do need more money. Red Bull and DJR are at the top because they have some very big backers behind them, which is good. That's how they're able to put so much money behind their races. That's how they're able to keep winning, because they have good, reliable cars, good engineers behind them, that sort of thing. But it's no coincidence that DJR used to be a mid-tier team. Remember when he used to have James Courtney and Stephen Johnson on his team for a long time in the late 2000s. He always used to finish middle of the pack-ish, late top 10s-ish. That was just sort of his thing when they had the Jim Beam sponsors. And now it's called DJR Penske. So I don't think it's any coincidence that since Penske's bought a significant portion of that team, that now they're all of a sudden winning races left, right, and center. I don't think that's a coincidence at all. So it's good to see that some mid-level tier teams can be brought up by an influx of money, and it'll be nice to see maybe some mid-level tier teams now be brought up by some more manufacturers' money. So the Kelly's team, for instance, with the Nissans, they seem to finally be dialing it in, which is probably due to the thanks that they're a manufacturer's team, or not due to, but a big help to their money worries, that they don't have to worry so much about the money because Nissan's supplying sponsorships and fundings for them. And now it's finally starting to show dividends. They're finally starting to perform a lot better than they were at the start of the year or last year. So I hope we get to see more manufacturers teams, a Chevrolet team, a Mustang team, that sort of thing. A successor to Full Performance Racing, maybe. I know Tickford was basically that. But I want to see an actual Full Performance Racing again. Mustang Performance Racing, something like that. That sort of thing. So that's what I hope to see. Because with more manufacturers comes more sponsors, comes more money, comes more exciting racing. The more teams we have at the pointy end of the championship, the more exciting and close the racing will be, and the more exciting and close the championship will be. And it's already a close championship. We've got 3 teams that do very, very well. Although Erebus seems to be propped up by David Reynolds. I'm not entirely sure why Erebus has a rookie on as their second driver. Because it means that they're doing very poorly in the Constructors' Championship as a whole. But David Reynolds is doing very well. Red Bull's doing very well. DJR's doing very well. So it's good to see that there's some competition up at that pointy end of the championship. Hopefully we get to see Tickford and Mobile 1 improve a little bit. They've had some pretty poor starts to the championship, especially at Scott Pye, and pretty much all of Tickford Racing have had issues driving their cars. So it'll be good to see some honest competition come back into it. And I hope to see some more manufacturers. I hope to see Mercedes and Volvo back again. It just gives us more to root for. More money coming into the sport, more eyes on the sport. It's just good for the sport as a whole. I believe that's the end of the news. I don't think there's anything else to mention at this point. So, basically, to go over it again, McLaughlin, winner of race 1, and McLaughlin, the winner of race 2. Excellent drive from Lowndes on both races. Good results from Gisbergen as well. And David Reynolds on the second race. In the first race, he didn't do so hot. A lot of the rookies did very well too, which is good to see. And the Nissan seemed to be making a bit of a comeback, which is nice to see. Next time I will talk to you. Next episode will be coming after Winton, I believe. So the Winton Super Sprint is coming in just about 2 weeks. They'll be at Winton, racing their cars. Another 2 races coming from Winton, and hopefully we get to see some more action, some more race wins, and maybe we get to see a little bit of a challenge to Scott McLaughlin's leadership, because at the moment he's kind of running away from it. Thanks for listening to the V8 Supercars Fancast. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.